Welcome to Many a Day. Wanted to share with you a cool thing we made. It was a scuba tank out of a marker cap and try to walk you through. It's good to have, I've tried to put some notations. It's good to have a flat bottomed cap. I used a dry erase marker. You could use a glitter marker. There's so many different things you could use. Started with Aleene's tacky glue, then a hot glue gun and glue stick, and scissors, jewelry finds, etc. If you need to stop the tape and pause it to look at things, you're welcome to do so. These are just some examples of some marker sticks. The open end of the cap is where I put the bubble top for the scuba tank. I had some little bumpers that are the plastic things that you put on the back of your pictures to keep them from hitting the walls, and tried to use that, and you'll see it failed, but I'm walking you through what I did. I glued the outer ring as well as the little bumper. I used foam board also, cut out circles with a one-hole punch to glue that to the little silicone earring backing so that you would have the mouthpiece. And this is just the one end of the necklace that I cut off, and I put the little gold sphere in it, glued with the Aleene's tacky glue so that you'd have a good connection. And that's going to be a connector, and this is just showing you it's 3 inches approximately. That worked out real well to wrap the that rubber around that tubing to make it look like the tubing to the tank. Here's the silicone earring backing, and I just cut it off. So you have that opening, looks like as best I could, a mouthpiece, and there it is glued to the black foam board that I had mentioned before. So here you go, a little close up, and I let it all dry very well. Then I took the 2 one-hole punch pieces of foam board and glued to the other end of the ear necklace so that you're going to put the mouthpiece on. You can see right there you've got the mouthpiece connected and sandwiched around the tubing, and then later on I painted it black. Okay, here are your bumpers that I was talking about, the little silicone bumpers. What happened was the glue did not dry very well and it fell right inside the tube. And you'll see later, we'll walk you through how we took it apart. All right, so then we'll show you how we're gluing this little yellow bead into the other side of the necklace with the Aleene's tacky glue. They're duplicate slides, but I just wanted to walk you through because it took me a while to figure all this out. So then I let everything dry, and that's kind of what it looks like for now. It's hard to imagine a scuba tank, but hopefully it will make sense when we get through. And then I also used a perler bead and another necklace jewelry find, and glued that to the perler bead with the Aleene's tacky glue. You need a connector for this hose to connect to your scuba tank. I don't know all the terms, I apologize, I'm not a scuba diver. So but I found I needed to use Gorilla Glue. I used my Gorilla Glue hot glue gun because the Aleene's did not stick to this perler bead. So I used a toothpick on one end and used the hot glue. It's messy looking, but don't panic. The nice thing about glue guns and glue sticks, you can peel off with your tweezers the pieces that you don't need. Plus, it's going to be painted when we get through. So the main thing is to make sure it doesn't fall apart. And trying to show as best I can the connections. Hard to do when you're doing this one-handed, trying to hold it and photograph at the same time. And it was my first one, so didn't really know what I was doing. And so these are just a few more pictures to give you an idea of all the parts. And then I took a little red bead because that's the size I had. Again, it's going to be painted to show the other side of that regulator that attaches to your air hose for your scuba tank. And that's what it looks like. All hot glued waiting to dry. And then while that was drying, I started working on other things. So this was a dismal failure. So I had to use the X-Acto knife and cut off that silicone bumper and toss it because it was just a mess from the glue, and get out a new one. But I found it was actually better to use cardstock. And so I used a one-hole punch and cut out some cardstock. I did hot glue the ring that comes with those bumpers onto the edge of the marker, because the bumper is smaller than that hole, and that's part of the problem. So I hot glued that on, and I used the cool setting. Then I tried to hot glue the bumper, and it just didn't work. So you'll see in a minute what we did. And I used the cool setting because it worked just fine and it didn't burn my fingers. So just a thought there. So now I've cleaned it all up. It doesn't look nearly as bad as it did before. I just used tweezers to do that. And then we're going to paint. But this is what your connector looks like. On the left is a connector that's going to go to the tank, and on the right is the mouthpiece. All from things I had around the house. So you never know. So initially I started out with the acrylic paint. I used a metallic acrylic for the tank, and then the black gloss indoor gloss acrylic for all the regulator, hosing, etc., and used a little bit of silver on part of the regulator, as you'll see in a few minutes. And I took a chance. A lot of times you know that plastic will not attach to the acrylic. So I used emery board, roughed up the marker cap, thinking that maybe that the paint would adhere better if it was roughed up. And you'll see for yourself if that worked or not. It worked fine on the jewelry finds that were metal, but a little bit of a disappointment with this. So here you are. I've roughed it all up, hot glued everything in place, ready to go. I knew I wouldn't have a smooth surface on the tank because I did rough it up, but if you've seen scuba tanks that have been in the water many times and on boats, they tend to be a little rough. So I painted it, took a toothpick and pushed around to make sure it was nicely painted, and let it dry. I use takeout containers, plastic containers that I buy at the dollar store, or if somebody has a meal that they purchase at the grocery store and it's a plastic container, I scrub it and dry it and just keep those for my art supplies. So just a thought. Try to reuse as much as possible and not break the bank, so to speak. So here you have the black, painted just fine, and a little bit of silver on that connector. So that red bead is gone. It's now all black, and just gives you an idea. And again, let it dry really well, and then turn it over and let it dry on the other, paint it and dry on the other side. And that's what this shows. I just flipped it over. Just within like 20-30 minutes it was dry. It didn't take a long time. And that's just the other side of the tank. And of course I was proud of myself. Mission accomplished. Ready to attach. Looks kind of like a scuba tank, possibly. So had my husband inspect it, and he thought, yeah, you got it. So I was pleased. So I glued it all together and thought, we're ready to go. But then I found out it did not attach. It fell apart, and the paint ripped off. So I decided to use matte board. Used a hole punch, thinking it would work. The diameter was too small. Ended up, you can see how small the pieces were. If you had a bigger hole punch, it would work. But I took the pencil, drew around the outside of the marker cap, and cut out 2 sections of matte board and glued them on. But if you've ever worked with matte board, once you get it wet, or with, as I found with a glue gun, it separates all those layers. So I had to glue each individual layer, and then took once it dried, you can see right there what it looks like. And then I took a emery board and just smoothed around the outside of it. And it's probably too hard to see here, but the paint came off. So we just had to start again and come up with a better situation. And it works out. It's better to do it right the first time. So now you see the smooth end to it. And then I added the little bumper, silicone bumper that we talked about before. Take it all off, which I did. So now you see the different layers. I was hoping to show you the layers on here, because that's all matte board is one layer on top of the other. So took all the paint off, and I got Tester's enamel. Make sure you have mineral spirits or something that you can clean your brush, unless you want to throw your brush away when you're through. Also, make sure you have a room with really good ventilation. If you're able to go outside, I recommend you do that. Also, I wear a mask because I can't deal with the fumes. And painted it, and you'll see it's rough. I let it dry, and I ended up painting it twice. But remember, you're going to be attaching things to it, so it won't look nearly as bad when you get through, and you'll probably do a better job than I did. And so I ended up putting the Tester's paint around the silver part of the regulator piece, just to kind of make it all match. I did 2 coats of painting, and then this is what it looks like. It's rough, but for my dollhouse, it's fine. It's if I make another one, I will learn from my mistakes, probably watch this video to remind myself what not to do. And I wanted to be fair and show you what I went through so that you don't have to go through the same agony that I did. But now I have a nice glued piece that's all glued together. And then I cleaned up and touched up the areas where I had spilled some of the silver paint to make it a little cleaner. But I'd rather show you the good and the bad, and you can laugh and say, I won't do it that way. And that's great, because that's the whole purpose, is that we help each other. Now for a label, I tried to be creative. I looked at my husband's scuba tank and said, wonder if I could create something similar. Anything that's copyrighted, trademarked, you have to have permission if you're selling. This is not exactly like the tank, but I used my Cricut Maker to create this, and I had to make an elliptical shape on top of another shape and cut out sections, and then a scuba diver, and then type in the words and have it all sized up and make it fit. And that's just a close-up of what it would look like. I enlarged it so you could see. It had to have air bubbles. It does not match exactly the logo, but I wanted to play around with it. It took me quite a bit of time, I'll be honest, to do all that. I'm still learning with my Cricut Maker. So you can see the size. It's 1 inch by 0.274 inches tall, 1 inch wide for the whole thing to wrap around. So it is teeny tiny. I thought I would do the print and cut part of the Cricut Maker so that I could just print it on my printer and cut it out with a Cricut Maker. So you flatten it if you're going to do that, and then you can send it to your printer. I have an HP printer, and it can print out. One thing I did find with mine, I have a newer HP printer, and it printed gray, which I'm not sure why. I'll have to figure out that. But for this project, it was fine. So then you print, then cut, and it notifies your printer, and you identify which printer you have, and make sure your printer is set up with your printable vinyl paper, or you could actually use label paper. And this is what it looked like when it came out of the printer. And then you put it back into your Cricut Maker, let it know that you're going to cut it, that you've already printed it, and it will cut. So there you can see what it looks like close up from the printer. And then the next step is going to be that it's actually going to cut out your shape for you. And just make sure you line it up. Always test ahead of time to make sure you've got everything lined up. And this is just what it looks like on your mat board that you use for the Cricut. And if you're not familiar with Cricut, it has different colored mat boards depending whether you're using paper, fabric, vinyl, leather, metal, etc., and even wood. And it's like a little robot. It goes and checks it out and cuts it out, and there you have it. And in a minute you'll see, it's hard to see in this one, but you'll see some little lines around it that you peel off, and that becomes your little label. You can do this for a lot of things, but I enjoy doing it for the dollhouse. So you see my little label, and again, see how it's gray, not dark black. I probably should check my printer for a better color, but it worked for what I wanted. So now I've put that little tiny label on the scuba tank, and then we'll show you some pictures of the tank with a regulator. It was a lot of fun. It was really fun to see our grandkids get excited and go, wow, especially when I showed them that it came from a cap, from a marker, and they were just blown away. And it was really cool. And we were trying to teach them about the Cricut as well, and just all the different things for scale. So it was just a lot of fun, and hope you enjoyed it, and appreciate you watching. Sorry this was pretty long, but I just thought it'd be good to show you the do's and don'ts as I go along. It's not a perfect world. If you did like it, please subscribe, share, and come back and watch some more. Thanks again. Have a great day.